tonight's event, including Ross Locklear, Julia Steiner, Paula Harris, Cynthia Marsh, Marianne Sperry, and Sid. This presentation will build upon last month's presentation by having 4 brief openings for questions and comments during the presentation. Rather than posting chat questions, I will call on those who raise their hands. Intermediate breaks will last just a few minutes, and then we'll save the longer discussions, as always, for the end. To ensure you all know how to do this, would you right now move your mouse to the bottom of your screens, click on the reactions button, and then select raise hand. If you do this now, we'll see that you know how to do it. And then when you're ready, at the break or at the end, we'll see you. And as soon as you raise your hand, you jump to the front of our screen so that we'll be able to take you in order.
You might want to explain it again, because some people do thumbs up and some people just wave. It's different than hands up.
The hands up is on reactions. It says raise hand.
Where do you find that? But some people are raising their physical hands.
We see a couple thumbs up here, and we're still waiting to see the rest of you guys. Just want to make sure you know how to do this.
It's at the bottom of their screen.
Okay, I'll read it again. At the bottom of your screen, there is a button that says reactions. Click on that, and then you will see the raise hand.
Paul, I do not see that. It's not on my options. It says clap, thumbs up, heart. Oh no, heart, joy, open mouth, and I guess so ta-ta, and it's it. So there is no.
You know, okay, so this must be an Apple PC situation here. There's a bunch of you that haven't got your hands raised that I see.
Sometimes it's under participants.
If you're on a Chromebook, that feature does not work.
Oh.
Okay,
It's in chat.
all right, so check.
There's a place in chat after all of us are listed where it says raise hand.
All right, so a lot of you still haven't done it. What we'll do, if you don't figure out how to do that, if you hold your hand up, I'll see it, and I'll simply give you a manual call out when it's time. So for now, just so we can get started, we're going to go ahead and have Marianne lower all the hands, and then we'll move on.
I think they can lower their hands. I was able to.
Paul, it is.
Yes.
It is okay. So I do have Windows 10. It is in when you go into participant, basically a list all the participants on the right-hand side, and on the bottom right there is a raise hand option.
Okay, well, there's more than one way. And so thank you, Ross. At any rate, we're going to go ahead and get started now. So if you have any need for technical assistance, send a chat to Marianne directly, Marianne Sperry, and then she can help you offline. Okay, so last month's talk spoke of strange beings seen in remote places around the world. And tonight we'll address strange sights in the sky that haven't yet been explained. Some perceive these as a belief there are aliens here to save us or subjugate us, but more approach it with the fear of the unknown, or worse, fear of what others might think of them. Unidentified flying objects, UFOs, can be investigated without assuming they must be associated with extraterrestrials or ETs. The fact that our age seems to be experiencing more phenomenon of all types, UFOs, orbs, near-death experiences, and many more, may reflect that people are now less likely to ascribe these to demons of things that have been happening all along, but people have been afraid to talk about them. It may also be that consciousness is more ubiquitous than humanity is yet ready to accept. Opening to wider realities is not for the timid, but can be quite rewarding for those that are willing to know. Krista's self-description as a novice does not mean she is a beginner, but is approaching her observations with an open mind, not cluttered by preconceived notions. Uncommon phenomenon can attract unwelcome attention. And while critics can sometimes be tedious, they have helped Krista to refine and more effectively respond to those challenges. Like many of us, her partner and husband supports her work, but is a bit wary of where her findings might lead. You have all read Krista's bio, but did you know that she is quite eclectic, having been a yoga instructor and a professional actress, in addition to being a military journalist. Somebody's got a microphone here. Gwendolyn, thank you. Okay, continuing here. Krista has been involved with American Idol, the I Walk the Line film, and has even worked with Justin Timberlake in the Black Snake Moan. Krista was first contacted by BoulderExo's Cynthia Marsh. So it seems appropriate that I turn this over now to Cynthia, who will introduce Krista.
Hey there. So my name is Cynthia. And so in December of 2019, the report surfaced that there were an unprecedented amount of sightings of drones flying in formations in eastern Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska. Something about the story just didn't feel right to me, so I began looking into it. Several Facebook groups quickly formed, giving a platform for the videos and photos that people captured of the lights that were flying over their homes and farmland. And it was in one of these groups that I met Krista, who took it upon herself to analyze the images posted and shared her amazing and sometimes bizarre findings, which pointed to the fact that there was something else going on, not just drones. As a result of the overwhelming amount of photo and video submissions posted, Krista worked tirelessly and before long created an impressive documentary. It's our pleasure to have her here tonight to tell her story, answer your questions, and share some new findings since producing Lights in the Sky. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yep.
Thank you guys for everybody being here. I really appreciate it. And I've been working very hard on this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started and share my screen now. And I'm going to share the trailer with you all.
Tonight, a growing mystery in the night sky over Colorado. Fleets of unidentified drones reportedly flying in grid patterns, even spotted by law enforcement.
And we are seeing drones all over the sky.
There was another squadron of drones spotted flying over northeastern Colorado last night.
Out of this story, the FBI, FAA, and U.S. Air Force are investigating a mystery in the skies over Colorado and Nebraska, where swarms of drones have been spotted, sometimes in formation. But who's flying them?
I wanted to know more about the lights. What I found changed my life.
It was difficult to distinguish a structural part of it on the inside, except that it was glowing red, pulsating.
We now, for the first time in history, have a candidate for the mind of God. It is cosmic music.
Particles can multitask. They can be in two places at once. They can do more than one thing at the same time. Particles can behave like spread out waves. It's almost like magic.
The objects are there. There is no question about that. You've seen it now on government film. The astronauts shot it for you. And it's only you that prevents you from disseminating this further amongst the citizenry. Then you may get some answers out of the government if more people raise intelligent questions.
Tonight.
Okay, so that was the trailer for the film. And I had a lot of fun making it. It actually was something I did in about 6 weeks. I didn't know I was going to get a distributor. I didn't know that people were going to pay to watch my film, and I didn't know it would be distributed worldwide. So it is something that I'm proud of nonetheless. I learned so much, and I've learned it even more since then. So some of the observations I've had about the lights in the sky is that they can transition through different states of matter. And so what that means is we have the 3 states of matter we learned about in high school, right? We have gas, liquid, and solid, but there's actually a 4th state of matter called plasma, and they can move through all 4 of those states. They can disappear and reappear somewhere else. Their movement denies our understanding of physics, classical physics, I should add. They create their own energy. They can change size, brightness, and shape very quickly in a flash. They sometimes travel in groups, implying a form of intelligence and communication. They have been appearing more often all over the world, and world governments have studied this phenomenon, but with inconclusive results. And lastly, I've noticed a correlation with sightings, people who've seen these lights, and those who invite the lights, either through seances or meditation or lasers. So as Cynthia was talking about, people saw these lights and their first reaction was that it was drones. Let me see if I can get rid of this thing here. And I was totally up for that. I was down for that being the answer. So I went out into the Colorado plains to find one for myself with my kids in the back seat. And I never found a drone, but I did see 3 low hanging lights in the sky, too low to be airplanes, too high to be a tower. And they were spread out pretty evenly over a few miles. And then all of a sudden they just would start fading away in sequence. And I thought that was really strange. So I went home and I started downloading videos of the lights and editing them. And with just adjusting brightness and contrast, nothing crazy. Let me see here. So see, I'm going to go through some of the lights that I saw. Here's one. You can see that bright pink part right there in the middle. Another light. Pink and blue are common colors here. When I saw lights like this, it made me think of a cell or an amoeba. Again, you have that really bright center mark there. That's very common. Sometimes I'll just change colors completely. The light was blue and pink, and then out of nowhere, it turned this green color. And you'll notice that green globe in the up left corner. This one was really interesting. It looks like a chicken embryo or something, and it has what looks like an open mouth. And what's even weirder is it actually ended up closing its mouth in the next frame, which is very similar to this light in the sky, which looks like something out of nightmares. It's like gaseous fangs, but it also closed its mouth randomly and nothing else changed. I call it a mouth, but I should probably just call it an opening. This one was really strange. It's a very clear blue ball. It has shadow to it, and it's very clearly surrounded by green mist. We have the 2 pink dots again, which is something that's very curious and interesting, and I think it's important. And then the blue and the green. Now, this is the one that really freaked me out when I saw it. This is from Steve Barone's video that I covered in my documentary. And this is like barbell lights where it was shooting away from the center source. And then it would swing over to the left and it would move back and forth like a jump rope, as if someone had been holding on to either end, moving it around through space. It could do U-E's and zigzags. Again, here's it moving over to the right. Sometimes these lights in the sky, in order to move through space, they reach themselves out and then contract again, kind of like an inchworm. Here's another one. Here's one where it reaches out. It's broken up into 4 different sections. And that's actually really common. This one really looks like a worm light. Notice the top bright part where you would imagine the head would be. Same thing here. This is a rod, the mythical rod. Some people don't want to believe exists, and they say it's just because people's cameras aren't fast enough to catch it, frames per second. But someone sent me a picture of a rod that they caught on their webcam, and I was able to adjust the brightness and contrast and still see those inner spheres of light. Now, this is the one I told you that changed my life, because this light was moving not just like a worm through space, which is weird enough as it is, but then it started to like play with its surroundings. It was demonstrating, it looked like it was playing. It really did look like it was playing, and it was just jumping out of this gas source. Here's another one. You can see in the original image very clearly what's happening, but when I adjust the brightness and contrast, you can see even more clearly that you can see the gas tail as it jumped out or pushed out, or whatever you want to call it, out of the blue gas. Now, this one's really weird. I can't explain this at all. This is still a mystery to me. This light is reflecting. It's sometimes, and you'll see it in a video, it'll flash, and the flash will reflect or refract off of some unseen source. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's refracting off of its electromagnetic field that it's created, but why is it a straight horizon while the light is a sphere? Other images are very geometric, and not just geometric, but the lines that form the geometry change colors randomly. We're familiar with the Roy G. Biv spectrum, but these are all sorts of colors in all different types of order. You can see it looks like it's following some sort of graph. This one looked like it had disappeared, but when I adjusted the brightness higher, it was still there. This was a light that was filmed during the daytime, and it looked like it was just a little white dot in the sky, but when I zoomed in, I could see all of these different changes. Again, you have the blue gas. It's on a white line of some sort, and that white line changes colors. Here's another similar light with the same type of behaviors filmed by someone else. The lights can move really quickly within themselves, giving the illusion of a sphere. And these ones are absolutely beautiful. This one is very strange. It's the only one of this type that I've ever seen. It still has that 3D look where it's giving shadows on itself. And it also has that brighter white spot in the middle. Now that bright spot in the middle is very, very common. I call it the little jelly bean. And I feel, in my personal opinion, that that's the light source, and it can emanate the other material that it's made out of to appear larger. So this is an interesting, somebody sent me some lights in the sky, and I zoomed in on it, and I saw this donut light, which is common. Some people like to call it a torrid, which basically means donut shaped, or a plasma ball, which can do this. And it looked like something was coming out of the side of it here, right? Well, after a while, you could actually see it was coming out more. It was manifesting more and more until it really, really started to come out completely and totally. Strangely enough, the new one started to suck in the parent light. You could see it's moving back into the light that it just created. Here it's really bright because I had to really adjust the brightness so that we could still see the residue of the light that was now entering into the second light. And then finally, this is what it looked like from afar. Now this is a light that was filmed by Steve Barone. I should have put his name down here, but we'll cover him for sure. So much of my documentary was about his amazing work. And people look at this light and say it's a helicopter. Actually, to this day, people look at this light and say that it's a helicopter. And what was interesting about it, it didn't start out with two lights. It actually was able to split itself into two and join back together again. It would flash very brightly. It could move around and make weird squiggly shapes. Sometimes its flashes would be in weird shapes like this, which kind of reminds me of a bird. Here's one of those squiggly worm shapes again. And then the original, what I felt like was its home state of a cell or an amoeba. And notice the little bits sticking out like spikes. So this is Steve Barone's film, and I slowed this down, I think about 10% speed or something. And I was just adjusting the brightness and contrast, and I had noticed a bunch of other lights in the background that I didn't notice beforehand. And I noticed those lights weren't moving anywhere. They were staying in the same spot, and they weren't flashing like you would imagine an airplane to flash, where you could guess and count to the beat of when the next flash would be. These flashes were completely random. And also notice the light here. It's going to move like a worm, and if you pay very close attention, you're going to see the light refract off of an unseen source. And I added, I had a piano behind me, and I thought, I need to hear what I'm seeing, so I recorded some keytones, and I added the keytones so that we can better understand what's happening. I don't know if you just saw that, but there it was, that refraction. Here you can see it's splitting off into two and it's pushing a light out to its side. It seems to me when I saw this that the lights were communicating. And I remember telling my husband when I saw this big bright light that Steve was filming that it was acting up, that he was being loud and obnoxious and the other lights were trying to tell him to calm down. And I know I was personifying the lights, but that's truly, truly what I felt in my heart of what this light was. It had personality. And so that goes on for quite some time, as you can see. So someone sent me a video of the lights, and I didn't want to edit it because it was just a black sky and it was pretty boring. But I eventually got to it, and I had to turn up the brightness to see what this woman was filming. And I noticed that whenever I turned up the brightness and contrast, I was getting all this noise in the background, what you see here. But I couldn't avoid it. If I wanted to see what she was seeing, I had to turn up the brightness and contrast. So I just thought I would work with it. And as I was looking at it, I was kind of mesmerized because wherever the light moved, it looked like it was affecting the noise, which could be explained with digital technology, but it was still interesting to watch nonetheless. But then I started noticing these really, really weird shapes that looked like something that random data wouldn't and shouldn't be able to create. So if you look over here on this first part, this first rectangle, right here, you see something that looks very similar to a butterfly. It has the symmetrical shapes to it, and even little antenna. And then I noticed in the next frame that it morphed into another little butterfly shape. And eventually it morphed into a bee or a bat. And for me, there is no doubt in my mind that that's not possible with random data. So I cut these up for you guys so you can see them better. Different bees, butterflies. And to this moment, whenever I talk about this, it makes me uncomfortable. I start kind of shaking a little bit because it's so weird and I can't explain it, and I want to be able to explain it, and it just sounds too crazy. Here's another example. I saw this weird thing, and maybe that's just random. I don't know. This is random. This is random. That's not really. And then it morphed into this thing, and then it morphed into this. Now notice that there's no curves. There's the illusion of curves where they have little dots that connect lines, but there's actually not any curve. Here's some other symbols that I found. This one kind of looks like a mandala. I edited a completely different video from someone else on the other part of the world, and I also saw symbols in their video. Here's a spiral. You have little symmetrical bug-looking things, a spider. This looks like a Celtic cross. Here's a butterfly again. Notice the very beautiful symmetry. This one looked like a skull and crossbones. And when I adjusted the brightness and contrast even more, the light source was so interesting to me. Here's another bee shape that I found, which again doesn't make any sense. Different video, different camera, different part of the world, different person. And this bee shape appeared multiple times. Here's what I thought looked like a scarab and another little beetle. I'm going to line these up for you because they're so strange. So if you think that these remind you of something, you're not the only one. I got this quite often. And it's true. So I went ahead and did some research on these 80s pixeled characters, and I was kind of shocked at the similarities. I called this guy the little man. This butterfly has similar colors. This is a really random shape, so you can imagine how shocked I was when I found something like this. And then the bee, of course. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, we're at our first break now. So does anybody have any questions for Krista or anything that you need clarity on?
Hey, yeah. question here.
Hey, Carol.
Hey, so you're kind of like at the pixel level, right? Are those objects like maybe 8 pixels across?
I don't know. I've never counted.
Because at that level, there's a lot of transforms going on in the cameras to do, you know, noise reduction, that kind of stuff. I work at Apple, and I can tell you the processing on those pixels is like huge. You know, Apple's going through like billions of transformations a second to like in real time to kind of like process those things. So you can kind of get some weird effects. You know, they're definitely not random, but there's some symmetries that can show up based on the filtering and that kind of thing. So kind of hard to really draw conclusions like at the pixel level.
Okay.
You know, definitely not random, but kind of hard to know the shape based on the filtering.
Okay.
I'm an electrical engineer, mathematician, and worked in vision processing and object recognition, and we see all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Edge detection, all that
seen
kind
other
of stuff.
insects before?
No, just as artifacts of the processing, kind of shapes like that will show up.
Can you tell me what artifacts you're talking about?
Well, when you do like some filtering operations, edge detection, all that kind of stuff,
Okay.
then at the pixel level, like the operations are like on 3x3 arrays of pixels, sometimes 5x5 arrays of pixels. Depends how much processing power you have. And it can just kind of produce some weird looking shapes.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen some shapes, but I've never seen anything that looks like earth creatures over and over again.
Yeah, that doesn't look random, but
right, I agree.
But there are kind of like some symmetries that will show up based on the processing. So you just have to filter that out for yourself, you know. At what point is it at what point are you seeing the filtering versus, you know, a real object here? And you kind of have to know like what the grid size is on the filtering, that kind of thing.
Well, I've been doing a lot of research and I can't find anything that says that random data will create insects.
Yeah, at like 8x8 pixels, it's not really random, but there are some symmetries that will be artifacts of the filtering, even at 8x8. So,
I noticed the symmetry.
We're going to move on to another question here. If you have any further dialogue, the tube, you can do it after the end. So Sid Goldberg.
Thank you. I just wanted to have to be sure I understood what I was looking at, Krista. This is a zoom in of the lights in the sky from the video.
Yes, someone sent me a light in the sky. So she had her camera and she saw some red lights and she was filming the red lights. I upped the brightness to see the red light, but then I started seeing all these sparkling white lights, and that's what you see on the trailer. So I was wondering what the white lights were, and I zoomed in, and that's what I found.
So was this of those what people were calling drones in Colorado, or this is just another capture of a phenomenon?
The black and white symbol video is from Colorado. She thought she was filming drones, but the colored ones was actually from a woman in the United Kingdom.
Oh, okay, because I was thinking about pixels, as the other gentleman spoke about, but usually you get a lot of degradation as you zoom in, and I was unsure what I was seeing because, like you said, there's beautiful symmetry. They're very crisp, those fine lines, but where they join on the right angle, you have a space in between. It made me want to, you know, show that to some math savants that I know to see if they pick up anything in the pattern just at a glance.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no other hands up, we're going to go ahead and let Krista continue with part 2 of her presentation.
Okay. So I've noticed that people either really love my film or they really, really hate it. And the one thing that I like to do when I think about things is make sure that I'm as objective as possible. And I've noticed there's 3 different ways of of looking at the situation. You can, one, find out about the lights in the sky and then just decide you don't care and go find out what's on TV tonight. Or you can actually try to understand and think about what the possibilities are. And those categories are, one of them is scientists. And scientists are just as interested in finding truth as anybody, as anyone else who cares. And the thing about scientists is they need evidence to conclude possibilities. If there's no evidence, then it can't be science. If you can't measure it, it's not science. One thing I have learned is that scientists don't know the answer. And I know that's kind of hard to believe, especially if you're the type of person who likes authority. I've never liked authority, so that's easy for me to believe. But the truth is, everything they tell you in high school of this is fact and this is true is actually only a best guess from people who are always trying to learn and are open to changing and having their minds changed with evidence. The other way of going about things are your believers. And believers are people who I would say are more right brain, if that is a proper way of saying it, just more imaginative, more, believing in the unseen. They don't really require evidence. If it just feels right, that's okay. Anything is possible, anything goes. And it's a very subjective experience. So for me, I feel like finding the truth is being able to find the balance between both of these things. On the left, you have scientists who don't even want to believe in anything that they can't see at all. But on the right, sometimes you have people who will shun evidence if it doesn't fit their ideology. So a lot of my critiques were about digital artifacts. So I've spent some time researching that. Now, NASA, as you can tell, likes to take pictures and videos of things in space so they can study it. And it turns out they also like to edit their videos and images. Dr. Mike Wall from space.com says that NASA routinely processes images to enhance details or to visualize things the human eye could never see. Other space agencies and many astronomers do the same thing. Astrophysicist Paul Sutter said that researchers take pictures of stuff in space to learn about how it works, and some higher contrast here or a little brightening over there can help us understand complex structures and relationships within and between them. These here are actual images that NASA uses to make valid observations and write valid academic articles. That first one here in the top left corner, it's kind of a GIF. This GIF, what you're seeing here, this highly pixelated image was able to give scientists enough evidence to say that this is an exoplanet, and they were able to make lots of accurate observations from this image alone. Here's a far zoomed out version of the same image. Now, an exoplanet, for those who don't know, is a planet that could be have life on it. This one here is the moon Hydra in Jupiter, and as you can tell, it's extremely highly pixelated, but it's a valid information, valid evidence for NASA. Here on the bottom, you have a couple of other highly pixelated images. Now this one here is an asteroid. Now, of course, the red arrow going through the asteroid, this is an artist's illustration, and every time you see anything about NASA and in the news publications, more often than not, it's an artist's illustration, right? Because people don't want to see these boring images, these boring pixelated images. But that's the reality. You may have heard about Oumuamua, which is what this man, A.V. Loeb, who's the chair of the Harvard Department of Astronomy, says he thinks must be some sort of spacecraft from outside of our solar system. This object was seen moving into our solar system from outside, which has never been seen before. It passed by the sun completely and totally unaffected by the sun's gravitational pull. And the way it was moving, it would get brighter and dimmer and brighter and dimmer, and they couldn't understand why. So this guy said, I think it's a spaceship, maybe we should consider it. And he said the most egregious error we can make, I believe, is not to take this possibility seriously enough. So obviously they didn't have a camera 10 feet away from the asteroid to take a picture of it. This is an artist's illustration. Most of the images are. So what was the original video that A.V. Loeb and all of the people who believe in him and to make national news, what did that look like? This is it. This very simple, very noisy, very pixelated, very bad video that many people would say was enough for our greatest minds to make accurate observations. So I've been looking into different types of digital artifacts, and I couldn't find anything to explain emergence of insects and bees and things like that. Something called blooming and streaking is when there's too much light within one of the sensor buckets that gather frequency waves to dictate the amount of color it'll give off, and that'll bleed over, that light will bleed over into the frame. But I never had any issues like this. Some compression issues is what are called jaggies or staircase, where a diagonal line will be a bit more cubistic back and forth. So that's understandable and expected. But I can still tell that this is a house and that this is a tree, just like this is a house and this is a tree. So I'm gonna play a little game. If you wanna just tell yourself, I zoomed in on an image in Photoshop as far as I could possibly go. I wasn't able to zoom in anymore. I actually zoomed in more on this image than I did on any of the images in my film. So I'm going to show it to you, and I'd like you to think to yourself what you think it might be. Again, this is zoomed in all the way. Okay? If you guessed tree, you were right. That is a tree. And I was able to zoom in and guess that, and it was fine. Good evidence. So when I first edited the lights in the sky videos, people were telling me that adjusting the brightness and contrast and zooming in made the object something else, and the evidence was therefore invalid and should be thrown away. So I tried to show them that I wasn't, by editing brightness and contrast, wasn't creating any falsehoods. I was just observing the data. So I tried to show them through this video what would happen if you looked at normal street lights on a building. And you'll see that they don't really change size, shape, or color. There's no color variance within the light, no shadows or anything like that. Pretty basic stuff. It's pixelated, of course, and we expect that. So this here is an actual drone, and we're going to see what those lights look like when we adjust the brightness and contrast and zoom in. Again, the lights aren't changing size, shape, or color. They stay equidistant and they flash just like you would imagine a mechanical object would. This here is the very, very first lights in the sky video I ever edited, and this is the one that flipped my world upside down. I knew I was seeing something that wasn't explainable. Notice it changes size, color, shape. It has shadow and variance. It twitches. It was strange. Not my best work, but it was my first. So here's some other images that I found. This is a helicopter someone filmed at night. It was the best one I could find. I zoomed in, I adjusted the brightness and contrast. You can very clearly see a silhouette of a helicopter. I upped the sharpening, and it's just really noisy. There's certainly no insects or anything like that appearing. Here's another footage of a helicopter at night. This is a Chinook. It's a military helicopter. Zoom in, adjust the brightness and contrast, and there you can very clearly see the silhouette of a mechanical craft, and that's what you would expect to see. And same thing here, sharpness and contrast, just random noise. So blocking is known by several names. We went over it earlier with the jaggies, and it's basically just a result of pixels being squares, kind of like a checkerboard. So camera sensor is like a checkerboard, and it contains blocks on top of each other, varying, red, green, and blue, because red, green, and blue are our primary colors, and all colors are just different frequencies of those three. And TV pixels are pretty much the same way. What's interesting about the noise in my video, and I wasn't able to find any sort of artifacts that would explain this, is that the lines weren't, oh, let me, just 1 second. the lines weren't in blocks. So for example, some of the lines would interlap with each other, or they'd be really, really close or really, really far away. And we have a lot more colors other than red, green, and blue. I actually tried to figure out what the points were of the lights, and I couldn't find it on a typical checkered board type graph. Here you can see how close they are. They're not equidistant. So that doesn't fit that theory. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, we're back on our mini Q&A. Are there any questions? And it looks like Vince has got a question. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Krista.
Hello, Krista. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
What couple of questions. What kind of camera did you typically use for your work as far as the resolution? Was it a digital zoom? Was it optical zoom?
So the videos, I never actually went out and saw the lights in the sky myself, believe it or not. I was just getting everybody else's evidence that they were providing. And they were using most often just camera phones. I did a digital zoom. So when people did film the lights in the sky, I asked them to stay as zoomed out as possible to try to maintain as many pixels as possible. So yeah.
Another quick question. The comparison of the office lights is real interesting. I know when I used to be into astronomy, I just don't do that as much as I used to. You know, you'd go outside and you'd see this twinkling star effect. Have you ever considered, or have you done a comparison between that effect? Because I don't know, it depends where you're at, but sometimes you can see all kinds of different apparent changes through the atmosphere.
Yes, there was one star, Vega, I used to watch because I swear it was making figure eights and moving all over the place. And I thought I was losing my mind, and I still can't describe. It must have just been some sort of visual trick. But a lot of the lights in the sky that we're observing move around and are changing and disappearing and reappearing.
Yeah, and just a comment, just like what Carol was saying, sounds like he has a lot of experience in this digital filtering, but they do have some cameras out there that you can put, I think it's like TIFF or something. It's a format that's completely uncompressed. So then you're going to really just see the actual sensor data. And because there's no compression, there won't be any artifacts that might be due to that. And of course, Carol could either support that or say I'm.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a really great, that would be great to have that evidence, because the sharpening algorithms will put symmetries in at like the 2 or 3 pixel level.
These are good comments too, because if you can take JPEG in RAW, raw format, that also will be non-compressional. And I hadn't even thought about that. So thank you for these comments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah.
And Cynthia,
Should I speak
go ahead and
okay.
Here.
We're trying not to get feedback, so I'm using Paul's computer. So the images that you just showed that had the colored sort of the grid patterns, Krista, that had also the little insect type symbols on that, was that the a zoom in of the light that was in the sky, or the space and the sky that was around that light?
They were, if I hadn't zoomed in, I still would have been able to see the white light.
But I mean, it was
so when I zoomed.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if I understand your question. Can you say that again?
Okay, so you just showed on your screen, there was 3 different panels, and there were sort of like grids of different lines and of color. And within those grids, there are those artifacts or those little, like insect looking symbols in there. Was that a zoom in of the actual circular light that you zoomed in on in the sky, or was that something that was happening in the sky around that light?
So the lady didn't see the white light. She only saw the red light. But when I adjusted the brightness, I could see the white light And then when I zoomed in, that's when I saw the insects.
So when you saw the insects, were there other sky shots that you analyzed where you did not find that? Were those insects only in the shots where there were these anomalous lights?
The one from UK, there were no red lights. It was just white Christmas sparkling lights in the sky. The one in Colorado, she saw red light anomaly.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, any other questions? It's been 5 minutes, so let's go ahead and let Krista continue. Thank you.
So I want to go into modern history of lights in the sky, right? I have the UFO one because I think that's the current mythology that we're all kind of on in this age. So when we think about UFOs, we oftentimes think about ships with empty compartments and seats and maybe even some windows and humanoid aliens driving the ship. Interestingly, the very first description of grays ever was in a 1901 book by H.G. Wells called The First Men in the Moon. And he described these creatures called selenites, natives of the moon, as having gray skin, big heads, and large black eyes. Again, the very, very first mention of anything that looked like a gray. The next major mention was by another science fiction writer named Gustav Sandgren, and he wrote The Unknown Danger in 1933. And he was talking about creatures that did not resemble any race of humans. They were shorter than the average Japanese, and their heads were big and bald with strong square foreheads and very small noses and mouths and weak chins. What was most extraordinary about them were their eyes, large, dark, gleaming with a sharp gaze. They wore clothes made of soft gray fabric, and their limbs seemed to be similar to those of humans. So how coincidental that the first mention of grays in the 20th century, it was after that we started having actual experiences. So Carl Jung was one of my heroes, and he was an amazing psychologist, and he was very interested in flying saucers. And he heard about the phenomenon, and as a psychologist, he wanted to understand more about it. So he actually interviewed a bunch of pilots who had seen them, and he concluded that the pilots weren't crazy and they really did see something. But regarding the actual mythology of what the UFO were, he said that all of us gaze into that dark glass in which the dark myth takes shape, undumbrating or indicating the invisible truth. In this glass, the eyes of the spirit glimpse an image which we call the self, fully conscious of the fact that it is an anthropomorphic image, which we have merely named but not explained. By self, we mean psychic wholeness, but what realities underlie this concept, we do not know. In religious experience, man comes face to face with a psychically overwhelmed other. So Jung believes that the lights have always been there, and the way that we're describing them now is just an indication of the age we live in. So what does anthropomorphic mean? Well, this is an image from Scientific American for an article called Belief in Aliens May Be a Religious Impulse. And anthropomorphism is very common in all mythology and religion, and it's the attribution of human characteristics or behavior to a god, animal, or object. No matter how hard we look, we just can't find the man in the sky or his aliens. But there are different mythologies before 1901 in science fiction writer about lights in the sky, such as Irish fairies. Now, Irish fairies, not the Tinkerbell on Peter Pan, but the original mythology, they believe that fairies exist on a parallel plane concealed from our view, so they're invisible. They like to dance and play. They exhibit ghost-like behavior if you upset them. They were believed to have arrived in dark clouds and landed on the mountains. And they're neither good nor bad. They have free will. The truth was not known beneath the sky of stars, whether they were of heaven or of earth. Other interesting mythologies were the Native Americans who believed in Manitons, which were essentially little insects and spirits and worms. So not just any insect, but an actual spirit. This is a real Native American song called the Firefly Song. Little firefly, little flitting white fire spirit, come and dance me, come and teach me, lead me to the happy dreams. And this image here is from someone in my Facebook group, Lights in the Sky, named Dawn Renee Owens Mueller, and she oftentimes sees these lights, and she posted this beautiful image that looks like a little insect. The Native Americans believed that the Manitons were underwater creatures, but that they could also fly. And that an interesting fact was they believed the creator of all things gifted butterflies to humans, which I thought was interesting considering the butterflies I had seen. And they believed that the Manitons were something like God, and when the white man arrived, they heard of the Maniton theory and said it was similar to the concept of fairies. And pretty much all of East Asia reveres dragons. They're known for being just and benevolent, supernatural and heavenly, and also rulers of water. This image here, this artifact, is one of the oldest artifacts of anything that has a dragon on it in East Asia. And you'll notice, unlike the dragons of today, this doesn't have any scales, it doesn't have any wings on it. It's actually a very simple worm-like shape in a spiral. They said it is said to be able to disguise itself as a silkworm or become as large as the entire universe. It can fly among the clouds, hide in or turn into water or fire, and can become invisible or glow in the dark. We have the Arabic jinn, which are beings concealed from the senses, again, invisible. They could be invisible or even change shape. They were spirits placed parallel to humans, and they were made of smokeless fire. We have the Abrahamic religions that believe in the Seraphs or angels. This is a depiction of the chariot vision based on the description in Ezekiel. Ezekiel described them as the burning ones, and it's actually, seraph is a synonym for serpent. He said the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels, and they were wielded orbs of light, sent as messengers to humanity. In Ezekiel 10:17, he says, when they lights in the sky, they went upon their sides. They turned not as they went, but to the place whither their head looked, they followed it. They turned not as they went, much like the lights in the sky. Their whole body and their backs and their hands and their wings and the wheels, they were full of eyes all around about, even the wheels that they four had. And when they stood, these stood, and they were lifted up, these lifted up themselves also, for the spirit of the living creature was in them. Near-death, very similar to a lot of what you hear about the lights in the sky. People who had near-death experiences claim that they have 360-degree view, just like Ezekiel had mentioned about what he saw. Many people say that they go into a world of light with light beings. They say that they can be in all places at once because they are outside time and space. And they often describe themselves as being a ball of light. People who have experienced DMT also report their experiences. They hallucinate in fractal patterns and geometric shapes and distortions. They encounter beings that seem autonomous, existing in a reality separate from our own, and those realities are more real than ours. Interestingly, I thought many people who have DMT experiences say they see beings that look like insects. So now we're on to our modern age belief on what many people like to think about the lights in the sky, and we call them UFOs or UAPs. Now, for me, I felt like the best experience of UFOs that I've ever heard of is the Rendlesham Incident, because these people actually were military officers working on duty who wrote actual reports the same night, and they were close enough to be within feet of the craft. So Jim Pennison was the enlisted member who was there that night, who said he got very close to it. And he said the lights seemed to be molded as part of the exterior of the structure. They were smooth and slowly fading into the rest of the outside of the structure, gradually molding into the fabric of the craft. So there were not lights stuck to it like we would here with an airplane or a car. They were moving and they were the craft. This is the senior officer who was on duty that night. And he described something that sounds like liquid metal. He said he saw the light and it appeared to be like an eye. It had a dark center. It appeared to be dripping something molten, like it was pouring, like steel from a crucible. It then very silently exploded and broke into 5 spheres, and they just disappeared. Any questions?
Okay, we are back on for a mini break. Anybody want to get clarity or make a comment? Seeing no hands, we'll go ahead and continue. Thank you.
Okay. So why don't scientists take this seriously? I think that was a question that I always said. And for me, I felt like, oh, they don't want to be made fun of, or they don't want to lose their tenure, or they want to have tenure. Or maybe they're just so far in their left brain, they don't want to imagine there's things that can't be seen. But the more I started doing research into this, the more I realized that they actually are studying UFOs. They just call them completely different names, and they actually call them plasmoids. And plasmoids are basically balls of plasma. And we really don't know too much about how and why they appear in the atmosphere, but scientists have been aware for a very long time that they are there. And what's interesting about plasmoids is that they can occur in the atmosphere, or they can occur, and we'll show that in a little bit, because of natural processes of our Earth. And if you look in this diagram here, this is the Earth here, and we have a magnetic field, which is what these arrows are. And these dashed lines are the plasma shooting out from the sun. And that plasma can get stuck in the tail of our magnetic field and kind of plop off and stay within our atmosphere. And eventually they can actually start to come down a bit. And you can see this is a plasma ball here, very similar to the lights in the sky. And then of course you have the donut shape. And here you can artificially create plasma as well. And it's basically just charged gas, ionized gas. So I found this amazing academic article written by a group of geologists who believed, well, obviously you don't believe in it. It is what it is. It's fact. These lights exist. And so they created this awesome classification chart of what they felt were the lights in the sky. And it seemed like they thought there was multiple subspecies, and they actually list them here. This one here, the very first one, they said it was cloud-like, which is interesting because so many of the lights in the sky are affiliated with the clouds. They talk about different colors and what size they were. This one down here, they said they're glowing leaves, tree branches, and insects such as mosquitoes and butterflies is what they look like. And another one here, they said the lights were partially with toothed boundaries, which we saw earlier, white amoeboid shaped, we saw that, insect-like, often with proboscis-like spikes sticking out. Remember that, spikes, we're gonna get to that. Here's some images that they took out in the field. This is somewhere in Russia. I'm not gonna try to even say that word, but they got some beautiful images there. And then here they were able to get some more lights in the sky. They just called this an unusual plasmoid, but they called these little things in the back bimorphous plasmoid pseudomorphoses, glowing insects. You can almost kind of see why people would think they were winged humans. They kind of give that a fairy effect. So I was just talking about the spikes, and I was reading more into that article what the geologist wrote about 2013. And they said they would always find the anomaly of these holes in the ground, and they couldn't understand it. So they hypothesized that the gas, the plasma, had a jet, and the gas jet would exit out of the ground surface in the shape of holes. Well, it immediately reminded me of a man who, Bob Taylor, out in the UK somewhere, said that he was attacked by a UFO. And this guy said, this guy here, he went to the scene of the crime, investigator, and he arrived at the clearing to find a large gathering of police officers. And he told the BBC that he looked on the ground and there were 32 holes, about 3.5 inches in diameter, similar to the type of caterpillar tracks from bulldozers. So how similar, and this guy said that spiked lights rolled towards him and grabbed him. And then he doesn't remember what happened after that, but he said it grabbed him. How did they grab him, right? So this reminds me of Travis Walton, which I think is obviously one of the more famous UFO cases ever. And the crazy part of Travis Walton's experience, unfortunately, can't be objective because he's the only one who experienced it. So that's purely subjective. But we can use some of his story because there were other witnesses in the car, 6 other people who saw what happened. And of that indication, we know that he said, and this is a Joe Rogan interview he did, that when he got to the light, it appeared metallic, right? So remember metallic and disc-shaped. He said it produced an indescribable warm golden glow, and it sounded, or rather felt like, a low thunderous rumble with high-pitched frequencies. And then he said it beamed an energy discharge on him. Okay, so remember that it beamed out energy, almost kind of like a tentacle or something. Interestingly, Travis Walton said that the area this happened is the second most lightning strikes in America, except the Everglades, and that's just because the Everglades has water. What's interesting about that is the geologists concluded that the lights in the sky phenomena happened in the atmosphere because of what I said earlier about plasma and ionizing in the ionosphere, or it would happen over thermal waters and mud volcanoes and with lightning. So this guy, he's a filmmaker, Scott Duchesne, and he's done a couple of interesting documentaries I've seen, one of them being The Living Sky, and he believes that the lights in the sky appear biological. And he makes a pretty good argument that the lights in the sky are so similar to our sea creatures that he believes they're really just atmospheric Earth creatures. This interesting one down here looks like it's made out of metal, and that was always making me scratch my head because I was editing a lot of videos of lights in the sky and I never really saw anything that was solid, and not this solid, not like metal. But so many people said, I know I saw a metal craft, I know I saw a metal craft. So I wanted to take them for their word, and I started digging a little bit deeper. And then I read this article that came out in 2019 where researchers said they could turn liquid metal into a plasma. So I heard liquid metal, which kind of piqued my interest because of metal UFOs, and I heard plasma. So I started looking more into it. And what happened basically was they were able to get liquid hydrogen, which is invisible and it's typical gas, nothing interesting. And under low pressure, it stays that way, transparent. But they noticed that when they added more pressure, that it became opaque, which means that light wasn't passing through it. It looked like a solid object. And at this point, it jumped into a different reality. It jumped with quantum properties. Now, this is kind of a big deal because before this, scientists were saying that there was 2 different realities. You had your classical reality, which is the one we live in, and you have quantum reality. And those are 2 different things, and they never overlap, and they should never overlap. What happens in the quantum world never happens in the classical world, end of story. But this shows that we could have a material that can go back and forth between different realities. Now, if you added even more pressure, then the hydrogen became reflective and actually turned into plasma and jumped back into the classical reality with classical properties. Now, when I read about opaque and liquid metal hydrogen, it made me think about, and quantum properties nonetheless, it made me think about the guy in Rendlesham who saw the UFO. And he said that he walked around the craft and he walked right up to it and noticed that the fabric of the shell was like a smooth, opaque black glass. And interestingly enough, high pressure opaque hydrogen here is actually called black hydrogen. So here you have some pictures. You can tell this looks like lights in the sky. We have the little jelly bean here and the donut and that weird globe sphere that I've seen many times with shadows and different variants of light. But this actually isn't the lights in the sky. This is liquid hydrogen, and this was done by Harvard. And it was the very first instance of them being able to create metallic hydrogen. Here is an actual light in the sky, and you can see for comparison. Again, an actual light in the sky. And then finally, one that looks just like metallic hydrogen. So this is the guy who actually was able to study the jump from quantum to classical. And he said that what's remarkable is that the conditions at which this change between the quantum and the classical happened was not what people expected, right? They were not expecting that to happen. Furthermore, this behavior could be universal to all other metals, so not just hydrogen. What's interesting about hydrogen, though, is that it's the most abundant and most basic element in the entire universe. So what is it called when you make metallic hydrogen? Well, the name is actually called deuterium, and that's a quantum fluid. And what's interesting is that deuterium is basically hydrogen. It just has an extra neutron. And the color it gives off is a pink glow. And what's really crazy is you start to have quantum mechanical effects at the macroscopic level. And remember, scientists didn't think that this was possible. They thought that quantum reality was only for the microscopic world. So hydrogen plasma, I started doing some more research into hydrogen plasma, and I saw this article, where does the plasma color come from Eurofusion? And they said that hydrogen gives out two different colors, red and blue, which combine to make pink. And leakage is blue. Now, what happens when you have metallic hydrogen? What's the big deal? Well, that's when it starts to become something called a superconductor. And superconductors are really interesting because it allows electricity to pass through it much more quickly because there's no friction, but also it creates its own magnetic field. So here with this ball, you can see the magnetic fields going straight through. This is our classical, the ball is affected by the surrounding magnetic field. But when you have a superconductor, such as metallic hydrogen, it creates its own electromagnetic field, and so exterior reality goes completely around it, and it actually can cause levitation. The only way it can levitate, though, is if it's hanging over a magnet. But interestingly enough, our Earth is a huge magnet. So if a small permanent magnet is placed above a superconductor, it can be levitated by this repulsive force. So superfluids are magical fluids that shouldn't exist, but they do, and it's crazy. And Dr. Natalia Berloff from the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics from the University of Cambridge said that it's half light and half matter. Sounds familiar? And these particles are feather light, and they can move around very, very quickly, and they slash and cascade, much like water in a mountain river, which so many of the lights seem to move like that. Oops. So science alert, there's no speed limit in a superfluid universe, and now we know why. And basically it's because superfluid, which is, if you put enough pressure on hydrogen, it can become a superfluid, or they're trying to prove it. It's a theory, but they're getting closer to it. It has zero viscosity and zero friction, and therefore flows without losing kinetic energy. Now think about that. That's a really big deal. It's such a big deal that people right now, it's the holy grail of physics. Steve Bezos, for example, is in a program that's spending $20 billion trying to figure out how to do this. Now, why is the quantum world so interesting? Basically, and this is very basic, the quantum world behaves in a wave function. And our world is more particle and localized. And they noticed when they first did this study, I think in the early 50s, so quite some time ago, that if you weren't observing or thinking about the way the object, that it would behave as if it were a wave. And that just didn't make sense. They couldn't figure it out. And so they've kind of concluded that the quantum world is a big connected web where everything is one. Now this guy, his name is Dr. Salvatore Cesar Pais, doctor there, and he was an aerospace engineer with the Naval Air Systems Command and the Naval Air Warfare Center Aircraft Division. And he's interesting because he was actually released, his name was released to the public by the government because he created patented UFO designs by having a compact fusion reactor. Well, how did he have a compact fusion reactor to create a UFO patent? Well, he was using deuterium. And he said that his UFO would be capable of incredible feats of speed and maneuverability, and it would fly equally well in air, water, or space without leaving a heat signature, just like the lights in the sky. And if you think about the Nimitz Tic Tac, he was talking about how the light would come in and out of the water as if it wasn't even there. So why is deuterium so important? Why not anything else? Well, fusion energy has the potential to supply safe, clean, and nearly limitless power. So if we can figure out how to fuse energy with deuterium or any other superconductor or superfluid, then we would no longer be risking our survival as a species on this planet because we would have clean energy. Think about that. not only would we have clean energy, space travel would be completely changed, transportation would be completely changed, everything, our world would completely change as we know it if we could figure out how to do this. And that's exactly what all the physicists are trying to do. And of course, people like Steve Bezos. So the current best bet for fusion reactors is deuterium. Why? Well, it's because it can reach fusion at much lower temperatures compared to other elements. And I know this is getting really scientific, but I want to get this out here because I think it's important. So not only can we reach fusion at much lower temperatures than expected, some people are saying even room temperature, and that's the problem. Right now we can make superconductors and superfluids out of helium, but it has to be freezing cold, almost sub-zero temperatures for that to happen, or zero temperature for that to happen. And that's just, we can't do that. No matter how hard we try, it's not going to happen. But they believe that you can make this happen with hydrogen at 17 degrees Celsius, room temperature, and that would really transform everything. And what's interesting about deuterium is that the one source that you can find it is water. In fact, this is a picture of Earth, the Pacific Ocean, and we have a lot of water and therefore deuterium. So when I heard about the deuterium in the ocean and the water and our mythological creatures of the lights in the sky who also loved water, it made me think about a light in Oahu from a couple of months now. And someone in my group actually filmed the Oahu light, a beautiful video, and she sent it to me. And she said that as she got closer, she could see that it was iridescent and it was made of light, but it was aware and it moved with the clouds and then into the big cloud above their homes. She said it was flashing and it was just insane, and they flash and hide in the clouds. So let's go ahead and take a look at that video. This is not edited. This is the original video. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom here. Now remember, it's on the water. You can't see the water now because of the noise, but it was directly above the water. Notice it has a bit of appendages sticking out, and you can see some action down below. So I'm going to pause this here and go to the next video. She said the Oahu light, it's almost like it was drinking the water. So there's this one point in the video, and I had to slow it down even more because you can see some sort of electric appendage come out of the light, and then you can see what looks like energy moving upward as if it were a straw. Let's watch that one more time. Now remember, eyewitness, she said it looked like it was drinking the water. So here's another light in the sky, and let's go ahead and watch this quickly. It was also in the documentary. So just like the officer in Rendlesham, this is dripping something, and it looks like something molten. So let's think about objects of unknown origin. I'm sure a lot of you guys who follow the UFO phenomenon are aware that the government just admitted that they have material from a UFO. And Harry Reid, the former Nevada senator who was instrumental in funding the original UFO program, told the Times that he believes the crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred and that retrieved materials should be studied. So that's what the Times said. But then Harry Reid got a little upset and had his own little tweet coming back. He said, "I have no knowledge and I have never suggested the federal government or any entity has unidentified flying objects or debris from other worlds. I have consistently said we must stick to science, not fairy tales about little green men." Another scientist who said he actually worked on the materials said, "We couldn't make it ourselves." So what do these materials look like? They said they have them. Well, these are actual UFO materials. And you can tell it looks kind of like metal, hard plasma, rock. This one down here, it is said, Tom DeLonge, who's one of the main guys of the To the Stars Academy group, who's affiliated with the government, paid $35,000 for this piece to study. And so these are what they believe, I believe, is what is dripping out. And just interestingly, you've seen my film, you know, I mentioned cymatics, which is just the frequency waves creating geometric shapes. And this is liquid metal and cymatics. And it kind of looks like a wheel within a wheel, just like Ezekiel said. Now, this is a liquid metal UFO that was filmed just this month in Poland. Any questions?
Okay, we had, Krista, we had one person that had a little bit of difficulty on the video just now. We all saw it just fine. Does anybody else have a problem with the video?
No. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a question, actually, maybe more of a comment. The solid one that we just saw and the one before, that looks solid. It's gonna be hard for me to explain this, but I have a program that when I check these things, they look more like the other UFO. You can see the light going inside of it. It's not. It's almost like what we see is not what we're supposed to see. I don't know if it makes any sense to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our eyes will see something, but it's not what. I'm gonna give an example. I have people, excuse me, I have people that film things that look like birds, and they fly, but they look more mechanical. But when I check, it's not really a bird. If you go zoom in and you put it through a filter, you actually see the same thing you see on the lights in the sky. The same, inside like melting lights moving around and colors and everything else. So I'm trying to figure out that part, if it make any sense to anybody here.
I've heard about that personally, but I'm not sure about things that usually the videos that I edit look weird to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Like the one solid one that you presented, I checked that one too. And when I looked at it, I'll have to give you that software so you can check that yourself, but it's not what I see. And the other question is, the UFOs that many people have been sending me that in fact, I have so many UFOs out here in Pueblo, Colorado. They're pretty much around. And there's a, like I call it EMS, like magnetic field. But when they are around, it covers the whole area. You don't see it. You see you'll see the UFOs out there, and you see the light. I mean, they come on my house many times, hanging around, but I don't know why. But when I put it to the filter, the whole area is with the field. I mean, it misses my computer. It starts doing weird stuff inside the computer. You can see it on the cards and everything else. And I'm trying to figure out, what is it? Why does it, not just the area where the field, the UFO is, but why does it cover the whole? I mean, in the screen, even in the phones themselves, like people cell phones, when I put it to the filter, when you get checked to the phone, you have the size of a cell phone, where it affects the screen and the outside of the phone. Totally weird colors coming out of it. So I'm trying to figure out what is that?
It's a glitch in the system.
But it's in all the systems?
Yeah, no, I know.
No matter what video I check, as long as it's a UFO, it shows that. If it's like an aircraft, would not show nothing. Man-made doesn't show nothing. But on the UFOs, you always will have that automatic.
Well, I think personally it has something to do with the electromagnetic field.
And those symbols, they look like symbols?
Yeah. I don't know about that. That's weird, but I'll get into something a little bit sooner that might help explain that.
Okay, any other questions for now? All right, you can begin sharing again, Krista. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move a little bit quicker. I didn't realize how slow I was going, but I think we're almost done here. I think the question that we all want to know, right, especially our right brainers, and I'm sure the left brainers like to think about it too, they just can't say it out loud, but we can't even agree, what is consciousness? There's really no agreed upon definition of what that is. I saw this article that just came out in September. Crows are capable of conscious thought. Scientists were able to figure that out for the first time. And for me, that's absolutely absurd. Of course they're conscious. Is this what we mean by what, you know, for me, crows are conscious. I remember I went to the Denver Zoo with my kids and we went to their giraffe section. And if you've ever been to the Denver Zoo, the habitat they keep for the giraffes is the most depressing giraffe habitat I've ever seen. And I was talking to the person who was working, and she was telling me the behavior of the female giraffe. And she said, oh, she doesn't eat and she doesn't sleep and we have to give her medicine, and she just stares at the wall, and all the classic symptoms of depression. And I said, well, it sounds like she's depressed. And she goes, oh, no. We don't like to put human feelings on animals. So I think we all have different definitions of what consciousness means. Merriam-Webster says that consciousness is sentience or awareness of internal or external existence. And sentience is basically the capacity to just be aware of feelings and sensations. So there's lots of examples of the video I'm about to show you, but this is just one that I edited. And it's a light in the sky and a guy with a laser.
Hey everyone, this is the video that was posted just this morning. I know it's kind of going viral. And we see this light that somebody filmed through, I'm thinking night vision. And I slowed it down to about 10% speed. Go ahead and pay attention now to the stars around it and notice the two bright lights here. I'm thinking these are actually two separate lights, but we're following this fast moving one. I think that's the one that caught the person's eye the most for understandable reasons. So it seems like the light sensed the laser was there and scooted over to the left to try to get away from it. But I think the curiosity got the best of him or it, I should say. And so it turns around. And the weird movements it's doing here, like elongating and such, we can see the stars in the background are kind of moving in that same way. So maybe it's just because of the camera moving, but I have seen lights move like this a lot. It's very common, and we're actually going to see it better a little bit later on. So this curious light now is trying to figure out what this other laser thing is, right? So he's slowly and cautiously getting a little bit closer to it. And pay attention, we're going to see other lights around it. It's not just this one light. So it's getting slowly closer and closer. There's the other light there. Very clearly, you can see that. Also moving, so it's definitely not a star in the way that it's moving. It seems to be kind of steering clear of the laser, but certainly curious there. The laser goes right over it and it flashes with brightness. It disappears. It moves out of the way as quickly as possible. And notice we lost sight of it there. Okay, it's kind of disappearing as it moves. Here it completely disappears. It almost kind of just looks phased out completely. There's the other little light there. And it passes over with the laser again, increasing its brightness momentarily.
So there's that example there. And oftentimes people play with the lights, with the lasers. So as I was looking at digital insect looking things in our skies, I couldn't help but start thinking about this, oh my God, we really do live in a simulation. And so I start doing some research on what that could possibly mean. And evidently it's actually a pretty well-considered theory in the world of quantum mechanics, because it's one of the only things that kind of makes it all make sense. here you have a comic, you have a cartoon female, and she's looking in her reflection, and her reflection looks digital. It looks digitized. Something's not right. So the illustrator said, if the simulation's details are sketchy in some places, it might be a way for us to test the hypothesis of whether or not we really do live in a simulation. And so I can't help but wonder, what if the lights in the sky are kind of the sketchiness that we need? This book was written by a biologist named Robert Lanza, and he makes a wonderful and beautiful argument of biocentrism, which is basically that consciousness creates reality. And that's, most scientists don't think that's true, because the world was there was deadness, and then life somehow magically created after billions or millions of years of evolution. But he makes this argument that consciousness creates reality. And what's interesting is it kind of really goes well with quantum reality. This is a philosopher and researcher at Durham University, Dr. Philip Goff, and he believes in panpsychism, which is kind of the same thing as consciousness creating our reality. It's very similar to Buddhism, but mostly that everything is consciousness. He said human beings are nothing more than complex arrangements of components that are already present in basic matter. Electrons are real, concrete entities. And here you see this image of actual hydrogen electron orbitals and the beautiful shapes that they make. This is David Bohm. He's one of the fathers of theoretical physics, and he got to work on nuclear fission back when World War II was still a thing. And so he was one of the forefront runners on that. And he was interviewed in his home in London in 1981 about plasma. And he said that he could see the plasma was interesting. First of all, it was sort of autonomous, and it determined its own conditions. It had its own movements, which were self-determined, and it had the effect that you had collective movement, but all the individuals would contribute to the collective and at the same time have their own autonomy. The word comes from plasma, which means to give form and shape. That has a sort of creative aspect to it, to make all sorts of forms and shapes out of itself. So what is life? And I think that we might want to redefine what life is, and I'm not the only one. Back in 2003, they realized that plasma blobs, just like Bohm said, hint at a new form of life. And why did they say that? Well, what are the definitions of life? One, it needs to have a clear boundary, like our skin. And the lights in the sky actually do have a clear boundary between them and the rest of the space around them. And he also realized that plasma can replicate by splitting into two. Now, I didn't write this, the scientists did, and we already saw in the lights in the sky that they can replicate by splitting into two. And also he realized that real plasma can communicate information by emitting electromagnetic energy. Does this not qualify as life? So this is an article, a scientific article, and the quote is, "It is included that complex, self-organized plasma structures exhibit all the necessary properties to qualify them as candidates for inorganic living matter that may exist in space, provided certain conditions allow them to evolve naturally." And here is a real galaxy. It's called the double helix galaxy, and it's plasma that's shaped in DNA. And if you have a strand of DNA and you connect the ends, it forms a torrid shape or a donut, which is the most efficient form of plasma energy. And DNA is basically one big data storage for life. So Bohm said, basically, that perception is reality. This is his quote. "Reality is what we take to be true. What we take to be true is what we believe. What we believe is based upon our perceptions. What we perceive depends upon what we look for. What we look for depends on what we think. What we think depends on what we perceive. What we perceive determines what we believe. What we believe determines what we take to be true. What we take to be true is our reality." Here's a quote from Hebrews 11:2 and 3. "By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible." So what is faith? Faith is true belief in reality. Without faith, it is impossible to please him, for whoever draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So the Bible, for example, mentions that if you believe in God, that you will meet him because you believe him, because you've made him a part of your reality, just like Bohm said. So this final video, someone sent it to me. He asked me not to share it with anyone, and he ended up posting it on his YouTube channel. So I figured it's fair game now. And it's one of the most interesting videos of the lights that I've ever seen. This actually, when I first saw it, looked like a human shape with wings. Let's go ahead and watch it now. Oh, let me give you a bit more background. He went out into he saw my film, and he wanted to go UFO hunting. So he got some lasers, and he went out into the dark of the night, and he found some strange lights, and he actually was able to play with the lights with his laser, and he was getting a little, excited. I'm sure that's an exciting thing to happen. And then he was in his truck, and he had his headlights on, and there were some trees off into the distance, and then he saw this. Now, as you can see, that's pretty strange. One thing I would like to point out here, you can see what looks like a torrid plasmoid, and look how close it is. And then eventually it moves behind the trees and further away. Now, what's very interesting about this is he did not see that orange plasmoid with his eyes. It was only until he looked at the video that he noticed it was there. So of course, I zoomed in, and you can see here the shape. And I actually ended up putting those images into Photoshop and adjusting the brightness and contrast. Oops. Hold on just one second. And you can see it's not a human with wings. It's just a mass of light and frequency and shadow and color, yet somehow apparently conscious, aware of Regan. Here it turned green randomly with that little orb there that we've seen before. There's one image here. I think the last question mentioned something about an electromagnetic field. And I noticed when the object first appears that if I adjusted the brightness and the contrast and I increased the brightness up really, really high, it made the light white because it was so bright, but there was obviously a very dark black void around it, which I've noticed is very common with a lot of the lights in the sky. They have a black void around it. And I'm not exactly sure why that would be, but it should be here in just a few more pictures. Here you can see a shadow on itself. It's that half liquid, half metal state, and there's that void. Now I'm going to play this out to the very last end, because you remember at the very beginning I was talking about jelly bean lights, and I feel like that's the entity. And here, this is the jelly bean light of the light that we just saw. And I think that this here is the conscious entity. And I feel like the gas around it is just an expression of this. So what are my personal conclusions after all of this? Well, Here's a quote from Psalm 82:6. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. The lights in the sky are sentient light forms made of plasma, experiencing their own version of consciousness. They perceive and act through electromagnetic fields and are capable of emotions, such as curiosity and annoyance. They can control their electromagnetic state, easily transitioning between the 4 different phases of matter. How we perceive them is of our own creation. They are all around us. I believe it is possible to communicate with the energy life forms through direct energy manipulation, such as prayer, meditation, seances, and lasers, because ultimately, we live in an electromagnetic reality. And so much more. I would love to go on, but I don't want this PowerPoint to last hours and hours, but there's so much more to the story, and I can't wait to continue my research. All right, any questions?
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Krista. And
I
we
have a
got
question.
Sid Goldberg.
Wait, no, Jonathan has a question.
Well, I called on Sid. I'll get you in a second, Jonathan.
All right.
That was a great presentation, Krista. I think you're really onto something with the plasma. I'm actually right now editing a project on the very same concept, and I'm entertaining similar conclusions. So it would be great to pursue this conversation at another time together and compare sort of ideas on that. And great job. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I'll send an email to both of you. Sid works with Gaia TV. Okay, Jonathan.
Yeah, so I did have a question regarding the different colors of the plasma and what you think about it. Do you think that potentially the plasma colors can portray a different type of energy, meaning good, bad, neutral, and overall, like what's your thought and senses of them reflecting on us? Do you think they're on an agenda, or is it just something that's just there?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think there's multiple questions there, and the first one being about the color. And I've heard some people say that if it's a black shadow, that means it's bad, and if it's light, then that means it's good. But for me, I don't have any experience researching, and I like to stay in that left brain. I always have to have at least some shred of evidence to go off of. So what I do have to go off of is that if this really is truly just sentient plasma, the color of plasma is indicative of the fusion that's occurring, which is typically going to be hydrogen. Or if that hydrogen plasma ball is in the atmosphere, then the colors could also represent the different other elements that it's interacting with at that time. But as opposed to relating color to any sort of emotion, I haven't thought about that. And then I think the last question you had was, oh gosh, I can't remember.
It was, what was your input on their agenda as entities or being in our atmosphere?
Well, I think they were here before humans were. What's interesting about deuterium is that it was made during the Big Bang, which is very interesting. And Jupiter and Saturn are actually metallic hydrogen. The entire planet of Saturn and Jupiter could have sentient plasma life forms all around it. So I feel like the lights in the sky have been here way before humans ever were. And are they like coming down and affecting our DNA or giving us messages or making sure that we're good or punishing us if we're bad. I don't know. I think for me, that kind of goes into the more anthropomorphic view of it. And my guess now, and it could change, is that they're just other conscious entities doing their thing in the atmosphere. And I think if we have been seeing them more often lately, it's because of things like nuclear reactors, nuclear bombs, and also our modern technology is really increasing the amount of electromagnetic energy that we're giving off. It's actually causing a lot of problems, and scientists are trying to figure out the true effects, what we're doing to the electromagnetic field and how it might affect us. And if it affects us, why not other electromagnetic beings, entities? So to answer your question, I don't think that they're here as overlords or anything like that.
Okay. So, I mean, I've had some experiences with them. I've been under hypnosis, and I've personally been in contact with some of these plasma entities. I sent you a chat message with some similar videos and pictures that you displayed, but I think the reason why we do see them more often now is they are wanting us to observe them, but also they're here to overlook everything.
Jonathan, we're starting to get a line here. If you have any further comments, can you hold your hand up again? And I'll put you in line after that.
Sure.
I'm gonna move to Ross, then Paula, then Don.
All right. So yeah, thanks, Krista. Wow, this is really good. Thought-provoking, very well researched. Yeah, excellent presentation. So my question is, so those entities, if they're entities, they are conscious beings, do you think they are some kind of interdimensional, transdimensional, extra dimensional, that they exist in their own realities and they are basically just quote unquote bleeding into our realities, and that black void around them could be the boundaries between their transdimensional reality and our reality? So is there some kind of a conscious communication existing, coexistence happening with them and us?
I think so. I definitely think so. And I think we need to define too what dimensions even means, you know. And for me, I think dimensions would be just different levels of frequency. And so if these lights are at higher or lower frequency and outside of our visual spectrum, then I feel like that would count as a different dimension. And I do feel like they're bleeding over into our dimension. In my documentary, I talked about matter and antimatter are two different sides of the same coin, and we need both of them, but we can't find antimatter anywhere. But we do know that we can affect antimatter with light. And so I believe that light is the main and only communication source between both potential dimensions or realities.
Thank you. And my last question, kind of quick, does parallel universes, past universes, and future existence of our universes ever came up in any of your research?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain, and I was trying to find illustrations of what I have in my head, and there isn't any, and I'm not a graphic artist, so I don't know if I can do it. But I believe in consciousness creating reality, and I believe in the quantum physics reality, in that there is no time, and time is just an illusion, and that we are all just electrical charges living in a moment that we create, if that makes any sense. I know that sounds really hard, which is why I was trying to find an illustration to kind of demonstrate that. But it's just like time is a human construct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to comment quickly here that when Travis Walton gave his EXO presentation years ago, he described a very physical craft and physical beings. And yet Marcelo Velasco, by contrast, interacted with consciousness that was solely energy. It seems consciousness can be experienced in whatever form and frequency band you have the ability to perceive. Now I'm going to move on to Paula. Don't forget to unmute your mic there, Paula. Lower left corner. Hey, Don.
I
Oh,
got
there you
it.
are.
I got it.
Okay.
I got my act together. Okay. First, I really enjoyed your presentation, Krista. I want to say something, and then I want to ask you a question. I just did a presentation in California on some sightings, and one guy's sighting. I'm going to show you this. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see this image? This is and if you could go on Facebook, his name is Hans, H-A-N-S, Von, V-O-N Tour, T-O-O-R-S. And this thing is moving on New Year's Eve, and you can hear the firecrackers in the background, and it's done for him purposely. In other words, I met Hans Van Tour. He lives in the Netherlands, at Monte Perdido, you know, in near Barcelona on the French border of Spain and France when I was with Ricardo Gonzalez. And this guy, Hans Van Tour, came up to me and he showed me all the orbs he had taken pictures of. And then on New Year's Eve, this thing comes right in front of him and it's moving. I mean, it is a video. I don't know if I can't play it here, but he's got it. If you go on, here it is, it's moving. See it?
Yeah.
This thing, it's moving. And so I picked up a phone and called the Netherlands and asked him about this particular orb on New Year's Eve. A whole bunch of people got these kinds of videos on New Year's Eve, believe it or not. End of 2020, the beginning of 2021. So I talked about this in California because of the timing, New Year's Eve, you know, it's like, and did you come to the conclusion of that there is a relationship between the observer and the phenomena?
I've noticed when people contact me and say, I see the lights, I have a lot of videos of the lights, will you look at them for me? Then I say, did you just so happen try to have a seance or a meditation or anything like that? And they pretty much always say yes. So I do think that there's people, they're inviting the lights in. And it's so funny because I've never seen the lights in the sky. You think I would have, but I haven't. And sometimes I'm in my room at night and I'm trying to tell myself, I want to see the light. I want to see the light. I want this to feel real for me. I don't want it to just be on paper and everyone else's experiences. But I do think there's something deep inside of me that's afraid. And I don't know if I do want to see lights because I don't know, you know, is it good energy? Is bad energy? I don't know. I mean, so I think there's some people out there who are braver than I am.
But you're interested in it. You put a whole video together. So obviously you're involved in it. I mean, it take a rocket scientist to know you're 100% inside this. You're, you know, and then the next question I was going to ask you is what is your next curiosity? What are you working on next? What your next video project is?
Well, I'm so excited because working on this presentation, I think, was actually an outline of what I want the second film to be, because it kind of covers, I address all of my critics and I actually delve deeper into my original theories and I can go even further. So my first documentary I did in 6 weeks, like I said, I wasn't prepared for it to be what it was. I just needed a way to share the information. I put it on YouTube for free at the beginning. So with this next one, it's basically the information you heard now. I'm going to dive more into electromagnetic reality, and I'm going to take my time and increase that production quality.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And if you have any more, put your hand up again, and you don't forget to turn off your microphone right now. And Don, you want to turn your microphone on. And if you want to give us some video as well, you could. Don Corey? Don, if you don't, I'm going to move on then to Cynthia. Don, if you come back, we'll call on you later. Cynthia, unmute.
Hey, Krista, that was great. You know what? I should probably just ask. Hold on.
Yeah. I think we had a visitation there.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it over here. Where am I? Where's you? Okay, there you are. All right.
You're up here twice.
I know, I'm here twice. So anyway, Krista, that was great. So I wanted to say something to people in general about going out and trying to, you know, connect to these lights and orbs and stuff. I know people, like Krista showed that video of that being and that young man that went out and approached those lights. It was a life-changing event for him, and it was a terrifying event for him. And he wasn't going out in a space of, you know, really connecting his heart center or anything like that. He was sort of just kind of, I don't think he was really taking seriously and had no idea that that kind of a thing would happen. And so I just wanted to put out a word of caution. If anybody feels like this is just kind of a fun, you know, Friday night thing to do, it can really change your life. So I would really urge people to go out if they're going to want to make contact, really be prepared, because it, you know, shit can happen. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to say is with Krista. So you've analyzed, I don't know how many hours that you put in of looking at these lights, and you know, we saw these lights in the beginning of what you zoomed in on, and changing forms and shapes and colors, and I've filmed them myself, and you've helped me with that as well. And they're beautiful, you know, they're mesmerizing and they're beautiful. And I just wanted to know, how has that changed your life, having that experience of looking at that footage? And just kind of, did you feel like you got lost in it, or, you know, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll try to be as succinct as possible, but I was in a very dark stage of my life as a teenager, and I wanted to feel like there was more to life than what I could see, touch, taste, and hear, because it just wasn't worth it. And so I connected with the local church, and I got baptized as a Christian. And then that began my journey into different types of religions. And I don't classify myself as a Christian anymore, because I don't believe, I mean, I personally don't equate with religion. But I am very spiritual, and I've always spent my life since I was 17 years old putting, I guess you want to say, God first. I don't know if that's the proper term, but just a bigger source first of the unseen. And I've always tried to, I guess, find enlightenment. And when I found these lights in the sky, it changed me so much. When I first found them, I went into shock, and I spent a few days not really being able to sleep and forgetting to eat, and not really being able to talk about anything else. And I still can't really talk about anything so much. It's an obsession for me. And I think it's just because I've always wanted to know the nature of reality. And I feel like the lights in the sky has helped me truly and implicitly understand reality. And I feel so much more at peace with who I am in this world, and I feel at peace.
So why did the lights make you feel more at peace?
Because it made me understand that it's nice. It's one thing to say I'm more than my body, you know what I mean? It's another thing to truly have evidence that we really are truly more than our body, and there really truly is so much more out there that we can't even pretend to comprehend. And I do believe that our bodies are just the tools that we have in this physical world.
This illustrates the breadth of our membership here. That was an artist here asking you questions from perhaps the right side of her brain or heart. So thanks for that. Justin, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, I can ask my question. Thanks for the presentation, Krista. I just wondered if you talked about how sometimes people can intend to contact these beings, maybe through seances or something. But I was just wondering if the beings then communicate with the people in any way. And what is that like? So that's my question.
Well, I think that's why I want to go further into electromagnetic reality, because we are electromagnetic creatures. Our entire brain is based off of the electromagnetic field, and military has known this forever, and they've already designed weapons on how to control the human brain with electromagnetic waves and the human body. And I feel like I know that, and scientists know too, and this is what I would go further into depth with, is that if you are able to somehow manipulate or affect the electrical wiring of the human brain, then you could make someone see something or make someone hear something or feel something. So if these are electromagnetic entities, could they not do that? And I think that's a fair question. Oh, I think, Paul, you're on mute.
I'm talking to the two over next to me here. I was just responding to Sid, who wants to get a hold of you. Do you have any more answer to that, Krista? And if not, I got a comment here.
Well, I can.
No, just basically that, yeah, our brain, we're all electromagnetic.
All right. I just wanted to make one comment here on a perspective, and that is that protracted investigation of any phenomenon has been known to result in seeing what is expected. Percival Lowell, the famous mathematician and astronomer who founded the Lowell Observatory, actually published 3 books in the early 1900s on the canals he saw on Mars. This was definitively disproved only 60 years later when NASA finally flew past the planet. Scientists thus seldom prove things, but more often rule things out as they can be disproved, then conditionally accepting what remains. So tonight we've witnessed some provocative analysis that may eventually be recognized as early evidence for something far larger. And so with that, any other questions or comments?
I'll comment. So let's see, Justin, so I'll say to you that I feel like my contacts that I've had are through dreams. So I get information.
Well, and I can add to that I was doing a regression that I thought was going to be about my past lives or other influences on my lives. And I ended up having an experience with an extraterrestrial that shocked me and was quite interesting. So you can, when you're open, you can receive things, and but it's to be discerning about whatever you receive, because just because the voices come from someone else does not mean they're any smarter than you. So, okay, we've got Jonathan has another question. Go ahead and unmute there.
Well, I'm actually responding back to you, Paul. So I know in my past life regression, I had contact with them through hypnosis. To me, that was the only way that I was able to make contact, besides some other experiences. But for anyone that's trying to make contact, I mean, I would suggest looking up really good past life regression therapists that could help you guide through that if you have had any experiences or phenomena going on in that area.
Okay, thank you. If there's okay, Carol, you're asking a question? Go ahead and unmute then.
Hey, Krista, really enjoyed your talking about your spirituality and your seeking. It was the most beautiful part of the presentation. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And my question is, okay, we're in a simulation. Who's doing the simulating? Have you speculated on that? What do you think?
Well, if panpsychism is right, then the reality is simulating itself. I don't know how else to go further into that.
Okay, all right.
So I think that human consciousness. Well, if I have to go further, it makes me think about the panpsychism theology or idea, which is that even electrons are conscious, and humans are just higher evolved, more orchestrated, harmonic examples of electrons. And as far as we can tell, we're the only ones of our kind that we can see, at least. And it makes me think of that Bible quote about how we are the children of the Most High, and children are adaptations of their parents, higher evolved states of their parents. I hope to say a higher evolved, but you know. So I do think that humans are a special consciousness, which is why I like the theory of biocentrism. But that's just an idea, ultimately.
You know, when I look at what we've done to the planet, I'm not sure how higher we are than anything else. And if you look at who's in control of the planet, I'm not sure that viruses may not have an edge on humans. But at any rate, since I have no hands at this instant, I will just say that our next presentation is going to be on March the 26th, when Sean McNamara will speak on raising consciousness for contact and for the future of humanity. Is that a perfect segue to what we've been doing tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get back to you, Jennifer. I just found out that you have a question. So Sean is an excellent speaker, a philosopher, and you won't want to miss him. So this will begin at 6 p.m. on the 26th of March. So mark your calendars right now. All right, so I understand that Jennifer Finley has got a comment. If you want to go ahead.
I do, and only because I am a direct relative of Krista, and I am just so thrilled to be here tonight and just see what her amazing brain has come up with. And Krista, beautiful, just absolutely amazing. And the dripping, that's what I was trying to explain to you when I was talking to you a couple months ago. So yeah, it was great to be here with you tonight and to just, yeah, hear you talk.
Thank you, Jennifer. I love you.
You know, I've got a suspicion that that beautiful scenery behind you, Jennifer, might be electronic and not real, but I wish I was there if it is.
It is electronic. I live on very close to the coast of California, so that is Half Moon Bay. Because I live in a very tiny cabin, and you would see all of my 5 children behind me. So electronic background.
Okay, let's move on to Ross, if you want to unmute.
Yes. So yeah, Krista, kind of one question came to me. So do you have any insight, like a personal insight, like that comes from your heart, from your consciousness? Maybe give us insight on what's going on in today's world and how today's world is being transformed, and how our consciousness is being raised and is evolving currently. And this kind of, I don't know, confusing, chaotic world. And what do you think? What's your insight in it? What's going on?
Well, I don't really have a very romantic answer, to be honest. I think I call myself a disappointed romantic, also known as a cynic or idealist. And I don't have faith in humanity. And I wish I could say I did. I would be lying if I said I did. And so would it be great if we found a way to be awesome and be sustainable with our beautiful planet? Yeah, that'd be awesome. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm not really holding my breath, so to speak. But even if we're here or not, the consciousness remains. And I don't think that human presence is necessarily, any more important than another different type of species that could live here and be much better and deserving than we are.
Thank you.
Okay, anything more? All right, with that then, I think it's time. Krista, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I think it's a testament to you that all but 2 of your audience stayed through to the end. Yay. So we hope you enjoyed this as much as we clearly did.
And they said thank you on their way out.
Yeah. And to our audience, remember what you heard tonight so you can tell your grandchildren you learned about this long before it became universally accepted. So on behalf of Paula, Ross, Julia, Cynthia, Marianne, and me, good night and thanks for joining us all. See you in
Thank
a
you
month.
guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Well done, everybody.